Thank you very much for the invitation to this study week. I have never spoken to legislators, and obviously I wanted to take that chance. My topic actually was given a few weeks ago as a 45-minute lecture, and I was told I have no more than 15 minutes, probably not even that. So please bear with me and be patient. It's a difficult topic I'm proposing, and time will forbid it to go into some of the major elements. But I make a couple of points. First point is an appeal to you as a historian. History matters. Please pay attention to history as legislators and historical analysis for the problems of today and the future. My talk today actually is based on such an analysis by somebody that probably nobody has ever heard of, Philip Bobbitt. Has anybody come across Philip Bobbitt? Yes, thank you very much. You must be the only other European. Philip Bobbitt is a man who combines three wonderful things. He's a historian, and we all know how important that is. He is, oh, this doesn't seem to work. Sorry. He's a jurist, a lawyer, an international lawyer, and he is a practitioner. He happened to be the grandchild of Lyndon Baines Johnson, so he spent a summer as a teenager in the White House, and he's been working for many different government organizations. In his first book, that appeared in 2002, and I wanted to show it to you, but it doesn't seem to work, deals with the state, the evolution of the state. Now, let's remember, the state is a European invention of the 15th century. It may be the most important invention by Europeans. The state is still as important in the 21st century as it was in the 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th. But the state undertook an evolution. And Mr. Bobbitt combined a historical analysis of the changing patterns of the state from the 15th century to the 21st century, and comes up with an explanation of the evolution of history in connection with state and the society of states. Now, obviously, all of this was very much European. And does this work now? Still doesn't work.
It's can't.
Yeah, okay. The state is the most important provider, of security, I would put to you. Let me just give you, this is a longer, I won't use all of these things. Unfortunately, I put all the dangers to the state and to the society of states here as hybrid threats, of which terrorism, that I will come to at the end, is only a small part, actually, but it may be the biggest threat of today, of the new formation of state that I will put to you. Here are the two books that I'm talking about. One is called The Shield of Achilles, and the other, The Terror and Consent. They are huge books, but they're important books. Why they are not read in Europe, I don't know. Henry Kissinger has called Mr. Bobbitt the most important political scientist of the 21st century. What has he proposed? Just a moment. Here it is. He's given us 3 plates that tell us about the evolution of the state. From the princely state of the Renaissance to the nation state that we all believe we still are living in. Except that something has happened to the nation state. It's in deep crisis, we all know that. How has it been replaced? Is it being replaced? Mr. Bobbitt thinks it's being replaced by the market state. That's probably a term that you've never heard. The market state. In other words, we are living in a time of crisis also because of a transition in the patterns and in the formation of state. Like it happened 500 years before, 400 years before, and so on. The transitions from princely to kingly state were always connected with upheaval, but they created something new and developed the essence of the state. Unfortunately, this is too low for you to see, but for him, the important element in the development of the state are the so-called long epochal wars. Bobbitt claims that changes, constitutional changes, in particular strategic changes, but changes in state and statehood and society of states happen in particular after long wars and after peacemaking efforts that are usually connected with peace conferences. And we know where those took place, and indeed these were important for the development of the concept of state. And in each of these conferences, in each of these conferences, peace conferences, of course, the issue of security was uppermost on the mind of people. I can't, what is important for each state is the legitimacy, the question of how is it legitimized. This obviously is an important question for today's state. And if you want to just have a quick look at the different formations that we have already had, you can see how in each formation the essence of the tasks of the state are redefined. In the princely state, the state confers legitimacy on the dynasty. I don't have time to go all through all six, but in the nation state, and the nation state came into being around the middle of the 19th century. The nationalism and, of course, ideology being a driver, or being drivers, it started what we have called, and still call, the welfare state. The state, the promise of the nation state was and is, for example, in countries like Austria, that the state will better the welfare of the nation. This is not true anymore. And you know all about that because you experienced that in your own various state, the market state, that came slowly into view, as it were, with the end of the Cold War, and connects with new challenges that appeared with the end of the Cold War, for example, terrorism and new terrorism. The market state does away with the welfare idea and promises to maximize the opportunity of its citizens. It's a reduced kind of promise. Now, Bobbitt tells us that these changes that take place unobtrusively, contemporaries don't always know about them, or didn't know about them, have to do with innovations. Innovations that are used to be mainly military, because wars, of course, were the most important ingredient of international politics. But they also refer to strategies, both political and societal, and even what's the word? Scientific. And what is important to me as a historian is that historical innovations, that is the use of history as a guide, as a provider of patterns for understanding what is happening today and what will probably happen or can happen if these patterns continue in the rest of the 21st century. In other words, if epochal wars created new types of environments, political state environments, but also environments for international affairs, international politics, then if this continues, this pattern, then there will be another long war, let's say in the 21st century. And the question, of course, is, can it be avoided? Is it avoidable? Can one prepare for it? How can one learn from history to deal with it? This is, I think, the practical part that I would like to point to. Now, what's important in the context of the new terrorism is that every formation of state produced its own type of terrorism. And I could go back to the 16th century, 17th century, it differs. Let's stay with the 19th and 20th century and 21st century. Obviously, it was anarchism in the 19th century. It was freedom fighters, so-called freedom fighters in the 20th century, liberationists. Okay. And it is something totally different now in the 21st century. We cannot fight jihadist terrorism, which is one element of security, with the weapons of the nation state. This is the argument. If we don't understand what is happening when a state formation change happens, then we will not be equipped to deal with the new threat. Now, history shows us that most terrorisms were either defeated or faded away. The new terrorism of the 21st century doesn't quite fit those patterns, and we may have to realize that, something different is happening and may be happening, and it may be a long war against terror. This, of course, has consequences for the organization of that fight. And this, of course, addresses mainly those powers that have the ability to lead that fight. Bobbitt, as a convinced Anglo-American, of course, believes it is only the United States and Great Britain. And that the alliance between these two, together with the alliance, let's say in G8, G7, would be the group that needed to cooperate to defeat what he calls the states of terror by the states of consent. These states need to consent about various values, and of course the main value is the parliamentary form of democracy of the 19th century, 20th century style. So if we want to understand the new terrorism, we must understand the market state. The market state is different from the nation state, which is still around us. We have a mixture, but we all experience market forces on the macro level, on the national level, and on the micro level. When I look at my own university and the life in it, it differs totally from 20 years ago. It is now totally market-oriented. I may not like that, but it's the reality, and it's a reality that will continue. So the market state gives up the promise of welfare of the people. We provide only opportunity. You take care of yourself. The market state has values that, of course, are carried over from the nation-state formation. One would imagine that the market state devolves, privatizes, but paradoxically, there is a greater call for the market state to centralize in particular areas, and certainly security is one of them. The market state may ask for or need more participation of citizens by means of plebiscites, referenda. We have seen that. But the market state is only now developing. And of course, it develops at different speed in different countries. Different countries are better equipped to organize a market state and continue the development of it. Let me just come to a conclusion in terms of jihadist terrorism. Historians have analyzed how terrorism ends or has ended in history. And there are basically 6 ways of doing it. And none seem to apply to the new terrorism, although maybe you are of a different opinion. One is that the leader gets decapitated, somehow eliminated. 2 is negotiations. Through negotiations. There are no negotiations, obviously, with jihadist terrorists. 3, if the terrorist group is successful, achieves its end. Hopefully this will not happen. 4, failure of the terrorist group in the sense of losing support for its cause. 5, repression, that is defeat by outside forces. This is obviously the strategy that states of consent will almost naturally and have taken over from the nation-state era. And the 6th possibility is reorientation, in other words, changing the focus of the terroristic aims. None of these are very likely. And I finish with the Bobbitt claim that if we don't understand the changes to the market state and how it is run, and how it is opposed by the terrorists, but at the same time, how its means and ways and tools are used by the terrorists against it, we will not be able to come up with a solution against and the defeat of jihadist terrorists. Thank you.